What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and here we are today looking at Q3 results and Q4 projections for Sun and Moon booster boxes. And this series, it's just so much fun for me. So last weekend, we went ahead and we looked at the Sword and Shield from the same view, right? Like we looked at our Q3 results, we looked at Q4 projections, but Sun and Moon is even more near and dear to my heart, right? Because Sun and Moon, you're not gonna go out and find this on the Pokemon Center at MSRP or eBay at MSRP. You're not gonna wander into your local card shop and find it, at a reasonable price. By reasonable, I mean close to MSRP, simply because it's so old and it's in such high demand. Now, the reason that gets me all kinds of excited is because when we went through the Sword and Shield exercise, there's a lot of noise in that market still. And by noise, I mean you can find everything that I just referred to, right? You can find booster boxes right around MSRP at your local card shop. You can find them on the Pokemon Center. So it's really hard for the math to give us any kind of accurate projections. Now, the math for the Sun and Moon series has been nothing short of amazing. You'll see that I have results in green because before we even get into the video, I'm going to show you the results for the last three quarters, simply because this is a very detailed video and I want to make sure that you understand getting into this, the value that you're going to get out of it. Now, the other thing that gets me really excited is, listen, we've done this at the 12-month, the 15-month, the 18-month, the 21-month interval, and every single time we get more and more data points to put in, the more and more accurate it becomes. Now, I will say this too. Listen, everybody looks smart in a bull market, right? Like, everybody looks good because guess what? These products have been on fire. So the real tale of the tale is going to be, hey, listen, if we come up into a little bit of a recession, if the Pokemon market starts to slump a little bit, how is this going to react and what is this going to look like? The other thing I always like to say too is, listen, math is black and white. You got to use those big, beautiful Pokemon collecting and investing brains up there to make your own decisions. But I will say, once we look at the results, you're going to understand that this can certainly be a big tool in our tool belt when we're trying to play chess and everybody else is playing checkers. Now, let's go ahead and look at some results, and we're going to talk about a couple more things before we get into this. So, again, we looked at results in Q1 after we threw projections, Q2 after we threw projections. Today, we're going to look at our Q3 results, right? We're at the end of September, end of Q3, and I am going to say this. When we look at the math, it gives us 3 different points. It gives us a lower confidence bound, which is just about as low as the math thinks the booster box price is going to go. It gives us an actual forecast, which I'm going to go through in more detail in a minute, and then gives us this upper confidence bound, and I always like to call this out. 32 of the 36 times, right? We've done this 3 different times, 12 times each time, that's 36. 32 of the 36 times, the booster box price has finished above that lower confidence bound, which means this is really, really good at setting a bottom. It's really, really good at setting a base. The other thing I wanted to call out is 3 of those 4 misses came in Q1. And again, that was when we had the smallest number of data sets, which in this type of equation, in this type of trend analysis, the more data sets you have, the more accurate it is going to be. So I think that is a really cool call out. Now, when we look at Sword and Shield, which we did the other weekend, 34 of the 36 results that we had were above that lower confidence bound for a 94% accuracy rate. For me, this is really, really good at setting a bottom. And when I'm thinking about spending my hard-earned money in the Pokemon space, understanding what the bottom might be is more important to me than understanding what the upside might be, right? Always protect the downside. Now, the other thing I'm going to say here too, right? I talked about an actual forecast. So the math is going to give us an actual number in 3 months. It thinks it's going to be at X dollars, whatever that is. Q1, Q2, and Q3 for this, 29 of the 36 times the booster box price finished either at that forecast or above it for an 80% accuracy rate. Now that's pretty crazy, right? Like, that is absolutely insane when you think about the time period this has been over, the number of data points that we have, how hard it is to actually accurately project anything into the future. So again, I do want to say, take that with a grain of salt. We've been in a very aggressive bull market, especially in the Sun and Moon sealed product space. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this. And I will say, remember how I talked about the challenges that Sword and Shield faces when we look at the math in the same way? Sword and Shield is only 61% accurate. Now, one of the reasons I say all these videos kind of tie into each other on the entire PikaPikaPaPa channel is because we're going to look in the future as Sword and Shield starts to age. Like, will this trend that we're seeing in Sun and Moon start to follow Sword and Shield? And I want to say this as well. Like, I'm not saying that the dollar amounts will follow, right? I'm not saying Evolving Skies is going to be the next team up and it's going to go to $2,000 a booster box in 4 years. I'm not saying that, Brilliant Stars is going to be the next Cosmic Eclipse and get to $900. That's not what I'm saying, right? The dollars will change. I don't think they're going to be as aggressive in the growth space, but I do think that if we can find the trends that these kind of sunset booster boxes are following, laying the trends over top of the products in the future is going to give us a great idea of where everything might go. One more caveat before we get into this. Listen, this data comes straight from TCG Player, and I think I'm going to try and transition this data over into Pokedata.io, simply because TCG Player only pulls data from their singular website, right? So if something doesn't sell on TCG Player for a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, right, the price doesn't change because it only pulls sales data from its own website. Pokedata.io pulls from eBay, and I don't think there's any better representation of the true value of something than eBay. So when we look at these booster boxes, if you see some prices that might be a little low or a little high, remember, this is just coming from TCG Player. I think that transitioning over to Pokedata.io is going to be the right move. It is going to take me a stupid amount of time to do that because it's so many data points across so many sets, across so much time. But I'm going to do it for you because I want you guys to have the best data available, and I think it just breeds quality, right? This channel is all about quality content, so I'm going to do that. With all of that being said, listen, I do put a ton of work into these videos. I love it. I love providing it for you. But if you love it too and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that subscribe button. If you have questions or comments, drop them down below. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Those 3 small things go a long way in helping my small channel out. I really appreciate it, and it lets me know that you appreciate the work that I put in. So let's get into this. Let's see what we're talking about here. Now, this is an example of what happens, right? The blue line there is all of the previous data points. You'll see this is a Sword and Shield base set example from January 2022 all the way to September 2023. The prices are in there. Then that orange kind of like spaghetti model that comes out, that is the forecast that is coming out. So there's 3 different lines. The one in the middle, the bold orange one, is the actual forecast. That's what I talked about in the previous slide where the math is saying this is what we think the price is going to be. The lower one, the one underneath that, that's the lower confidence bound. And that's the math saying, hey, listen, if it misses forecast, we feel pretty reasonable that this is the bottom. This is as low as that price is going to go. And then there's the upper confidence bound. That's where the math is giving us the upside of whatever product we're talking about. Now, I do want to say this. This comes straight from Excel. Like, this isn't my spreadsheet, or this is my spreadsheets, but this isn't my formulas, right? I keep all of this in Excel. I simply highlight it, hit the data button, hit the forecast simulator, and it gives me this information. So I say that because I want everybody to have confidence in the math, because this isn't some Yahoo on YouTube who's just sitting here drawing things out on a napkin, right? Like, this is straight from Excel. This math is buttoned up, and it is really, really accurate. So with that being said, let's get into it. I'm so freaking excited, especially because on the very first slide is a booster box that I have been bullish on for so long. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for it to do what I've been saying it would do. And again, I'm very excited to say that Sun and Moon has absolutely crushed the forecast. So when you see that kind of peach box in the very top, that's the Q3 projection, right? And then in orange, like we just saw, that was the forecast for Q3. So Q3 is the end of September, right where we're at right now. So the forecast said Sun and Moon booster box was going to be at $232. Then in the red, you'll see the lower confidence bound. It said, hey, at the end of September 2023, it could go as low as $223. And in the green was the upper confidence bound. And it said, hey, listen, if it balls out, it could go as high as $241. Now, the interesting thing is I show you the upside and the low side, but also the percentages. So you see the math kind of favored this to go down. It had a lower confidence bound of -5% or an upper confidence bound of only 3%. But Sun and Moon booster boxes just freaking balled out, crushed life. I love it. It is all the way up to $266 a booster box right now. Now, one of the reasons I was so bullish on this is, look, in January 2022, you can see that in the upper left-hand slide there, it was at $185. The booster box just didn't move a lot, right? When a lot of Sun and Moon booster boxes were going absolutely crazy, I knew there was a lot of it out there. I knew it was really printed heavily. But at the end of the day, things just have a tendency to revert to the mean. They have a tendency to follow everything else that's in the same set as them. So I had a feeling Sun and Moon base set booster boxes were going to pop off, and they did. The other thing that I really like here is if you look at the math, so now we're going to go to the lower one right there and highlight it in yellow. It says January of 2024. These projections are for 1/1/24. The forecast is at about $261. So the math is taking a very cautious approach to its future projections, okay? So it's saying, hey, listen, I know that you're at $266 right now. You haven't seen a lot of growth over the last 21 months. We understand and appreciate that you've popped off, but we're gonna pump the brakes a little bit. So the forecast is at $161. The lower confidence bound is down there at $240. The upper confidence bound is at $282. I'm saying it right now. I don't think this is gonna regress in price. I think this is a strong box. If anything, I think this is a great opportunity for us to maybe beat the upper confidence bound when we're looking at this in January of 2024. Now we get to Guardian Rising. This was an anomaly, which is why I love doing these videos. I love it when the math kind of breaks itself and things just don't make sense, because again, this is a very human, very uncontrollable environment that we're in, which is sometimes things just don't make sense. So Guardian Rising, not only did it miss the forecast, which was $383, it also missed the lower confidence bound. So we talked in the first slide about, hey, listen, 3 of them missed in Q1, only 4 have missed total. This is that anomaly that missed outside of Q1. Now, Guardians Rising, we all know it's not the greatest set. It doesn't have the greatest chase cards in it, right? So not super surprising to see that. But it's interesting to see the math. The math is really, I mean, it's really bullish on it, you know, heading into January. This is one of those times where I kind of scratch my head and I'm like, you know, I don't understand. I don't really see it. But again, we've seen this history of accuracy in these reports. So I don't know, maybe it is going to pop off. Like maybe this is a great indicator. I know I'll be really excited to come back in January because the forecast is at $370 and it's only at $347 right now. Really protects the downside. It says it could go down as low as 4%, and it really has a bullish upside trend to it, right? It's saying, hey, it could get as high as $407 or a 17% increase. I don't see it happening, but again, this is why we do the exercise. This is why we'll come back and check it. Now, getting into Burning Shadows. Burning Shadows has been performing really well as of late. You see that the forecast in Q3 in September of 2023 was going to be $406, but guess what? It's at $423, so it beat the forecast. Now, it did have a very kind of 50-50 approach to it, right? When you look at the lower and upper confidence bounds for Q3, it said it could go down 15%, it could go up 15%. So that's the math just basically saying, hey, listen, this previous trend, we don't know what's going to go on. We're going to throw some spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. But it did beat that forecast. Now, when we look at what it might do coming into, you know, 2024, very interesting that the forecast hasn't changed. It still has it at $407. Now it does, again, it actually has more of a bullish sentiment to it. Like it says, hey, it could go down 14%, it could go up 6%. So these last two sets that we've talked about, I think it's going to be really interesting to see where they fan out. You know, the math might be seeing or picking up something that I just can't detect, and that's why we gotta keep saying that. That's why we do this. This is such cool stuff. Then we get down to Crimson Invasion, right? The forecast was $193. It beat barely, but it still beat up at $196 right now. You see the math was kind of 50-50. It said it could go down 8%, it could go down, could go up 10%, but it ended up beating the forecast, which is really cool. Then you look at this, and again, Crimson Invasion hasn't grown at a huge growth rate since really January 2022 when we started charting this stuff. So the math in the next 3 months is very conservative. It says, hey, listen, it could get as high as 215, could go as low as 186, but the forecast itself is a very reasonable $201, and it is slightly favorable to the upside, saying, hey, it could go up 10%, could go down 5%. You know, these first 4 sets out of Sun and Moon, I do think at some point, you know, as Scarlet and Violet gets deeper, as Sword and Shield starts to age, as a lot of the booster boxes in Sun and Moon starts to get to the price point where a lot of people, myself included, you know, I'm not going to drop $900 on a booster box, $1,500, $2,000 on a booster box. So some of these earlier sets that are more approachable from a price point, we might see them spike because, hey, there's still really cool things to have in our collection. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. It's going to be interesting to see how this flows over the next 3 months. Then we get into some of the more meat and potatoes here of Sun and Moon, where we've seen a whole lot of movement, and you got Ultra Prism right here, another one that just crushed forecast. It even crushed the upper confidence bound, right? So Ultra Prism, it said, hey, it's going to get to $452. But one of the cool things that I wanted to call out about this Ultra Prism is, look, it had a 0% lower confidence bound, and by that I mean the math said no matter what, this is going to go up. Like, that's how confident the math was when we looked at this in Q3, and those are really interesting data points for us to look at, because we have yet to see anything when the math is so confident that it has a lower confidence bound that is at 0 or positive. It is always outperformed. Then you see it said, hey, it could go as high as up 6% to $466, but Ultra Prism blew it all away, sitting at $500. Now, the projection into 2024 says, hey, the box could be at $506. That's the forecast. Protects the downside, saying it could go down 5% or could go up 8%. It's going to be really interesting because the market is starting to soften a little bit how some of these items are going to perform. Forbidden Light is another one that performed really well up against forecast, right? Like, this is why I think looking at Sun and Moon is so interesting, and we'll have to layer these learnings into Sword and Shield in the future, because the forecast was about $290 and it ended up at $344. Again, another example where coming out of Q3, the math said, I don't know what it's going to do, right? It was up 10% or down 11%, and it ended up beating all of them at $334. Now, the new projection, again, another one where the math is being very reluctant. It's saying, hey, listen, the forecast is at $319. $19. The math is sensing some kind of weakness here, but it's also saying, hey, listen, it could go as high as $349 or it could go as low as $289. Again, I don't see any of these booster boxes losing a ton of money in the next 3 months. I just think that there's too much excitement around them. They're too hot. I don't see them losing a ton of money. They might slow down a little bit, but I don't know if this is going to drop 13% down to $289. Now, the next ones we're going to talk about right here are Celestial Storm and Lost Thunder. So Celestial Storm is a set that has just been doing really, really well like all of these other ones. The forecast was at $602, came in at $615. This is another one, right, where we saw that the math was very bullish on it. The lower confidence bound was only -1% for Q3. The upper confidence bound was 5%. Super narrow, right? There was a very narrow gap between lower confidence bound and upper confidence bound. So again, when you see these, I won't say definitive, but these very confident projections from the math, it's interesting to see that this delivered. Beat the forecast, came right near the upper confidence bound. So let's look at what it's projecting for the next 3 months. Now it is saying, hey, it could go as high as $709. It has a 15% upside built in, only a 5% downside, which is really interesting. And the forecast is at $647. I think Celestial Storm has lots of room to run. I think it's a great set, and I certainly think it can hit that forecast. And maybe, I don't think it's going to be a $709 booster box, but I think it can easily hit that forecast and maybe give us a little upside beyond that. Lost Thunder is a set I've done a lot of research into. I've been very excited about Lost Thunder. Spoiler alert, I'm doing my top investments for October coming up soon, and I have a Lost Thunder product on there. I think this is kind of one of the unsung heroes of the Sun and Moon era, and I think that this is a product that has some room to run. So you see the forecast was at $519. It ended up at $558, right? This is another one where, guess what? The math was incredibly bullish on it, right? It said the lower confidence bound was positive 10%. It's the highest lower confidence bound we have literally ever seen in the entire history of doing this, and it had an upper confidence bound of 25%. But guess what? It beat both of them by a mile. Again, just coming back to what we talked about in the previous slide. When the math is so confident, that should be just like a flashing buy signal for us, at least a flashing signal that we should do more research into it. Now, the story is very different when we look at the next 3 months, right? Lost Thunder, it has a forecast of $564. Not bad. That's a decent amount of upside over a 3-month period. It is split, though, because it has grown so much. The math is saying, hey, we need to pump the brakes here. It says it could go up as high as 13%, could go as far down as 11%. Again, not really concerned about the downside on these products unless we see some fundamental shift in the Poke market. But it is interesting to see that the math is taking a more cautionary tale towards Lost Thunder in the future. Now, the very next ones we're going to talk about is Team Up. And Team Up is one of the ones that, listen, I feel like the TCG player data is very, very hard to correlate here, because the reality is, to me, Team Up's like a $2,000 box. Now, they're not selling a lot on TCG player simply because who's out there buying $2,000 sealed Pokemon booster boxes? I know some people are, God bless you. But this is one of the ones where the trend is more important than the actual numbers, right? The math got the trend right. The math said it was going to go up. It obviously did go up. It had a forecast in Q3 at $1,408. TCG player today has it at $1,447. The math was very protective of the downside, though. If you look at Q3, it said, hey, this could go down as far as 16%. It could go as high as 7%. And obviously, this performed really well, beating forecast. Now, when you look at what it's rolling into in the next 3 months, again, think about the trends, not the actual numbers. It is very bullish on Lost Thunder, saying, hey, it could get as high as $1,764, but it is also split, and that is a wide line, right? Like, our lower confidence bound is down 19%. Our upper confidence bound is up 16%. That is a huge, huge delta, right? Like, we're talking a 35% swing between the lowest low and the highest high. So that is the math saying, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I do think Team Up is going to hit some ceiling sometime soon. I don't know how much it can continue to grow just like it has been, simply because some people are going to get priced out of this product, but it's a very exciting product, and I love watching these big dogs eat. So it's very cool to watch this one continue to run. Then you get to Unbroken Bonds right there. Another one that just performed really well. It beat every single projection, right? The forecast was at $492. Had a very conservative downside. You know, it said, hey, it could go down 5%, could go as high as 9%, and it finished at $537. Beat the forecast, beat the upper confidence bound. Unbroken Bonds performed really, really well, and this is a booster box that I have highlighted in the past that I said I'm very interested in. Haven't pulled the trigger yet. Absolutely, remorse for not doing it earlier when I called it, because I'd be sitting on a whole lot of upside. But you know, sometimes we make good decisions and sometimes we miss on opportunities. So the interesting thing for me is when I look at the forecast over the next 3 months, right? Like the forecast is at $552. Again, going from $537 to $552 in just a 3-month time period. That is not a trivial increase in price. Again, really conservative here, only a negative 6% on the lower confidence bound, positive 11% in the upper confidence bound. So maybe this is one of those sneaky ones where we will see it outperform when we look at this again in January. So coming into some of these final sets here, we got Unified Minds and Cosmic Eclipse. Unified Minds, it just absolutely murdered it, right? Like, I love Unified Minds. Unified Minds is one of my favorite sets from the Sun and Moon era. I love everything about it. I think it is just awesome. It checks all the boxes for me. The forecast had it at $485. It finished at $612. This is another example where I think TCG player pricing is simply catching up to the eBay market. It was bullish on it, right? It said it could go down 4%. It could go as high as 8%, and it just blew everything out of the water. Now, the math is being conservative on it because, again, anytime you see these huge swings, right, the math is going to be conservative. So it says, hey, listen, congratulations, you're at 612. Our forecast is 597. A downside of negative 14% and an upside of only positive 9%. Again, use that big, beautiful brain. I don't think this has more downside than upside, but that is why we do the videos. Then we get into the killer of them all, right? Cosmic Eclipse. Again, just another set. I love the whole Sun and Moon era. It's really hard for me to sit here and say that these last 3 sets are some of my favorite because I really just love all of the sets in Sun and Moon, even Sun and Moon base set, even some of the ones we talked about in the first 4. But Cosmic Eclipse obviously has amazing artworks, crazy popularity. I have highlighted those individual booster packs in the past as something that I think are crazy undervalued. But Cosmic Eclipse right here, you know, the forecast was $683. It is tipping near $840 right now, $836 on TCG Player. The math was very conservative for Q3. It said, hey, it could go down 11%, could go up 6%. And guess what? When we look into the future, the math is being conservative again. It has a forecast of $800, saying it could go down 17% to $690, could go up to $901 at 8%. I don't know if this booster box is ever going to make it to $1,000. $1,000 is just such a crazy big number, but I do think that this booster box has everything that it takes to continue to be a strong performer, and I think it's going to beat forecast, and I think it's going to continue to do well in the future. So listen, with all of that being said, these are the kind of fun things that we do all the time here on the PikaPikaPaPa channel. So if this kind of data and analysis and projections and stuff revs your engine as much as it revs mine and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Questions or comments, drop them down below. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Have an epic one. Later, everybody.